Shulumal, as we start off. Oh, they're really going at it. Perfect. While they're at it, let's start off with a bit of American history. We previously discussed the size of the bones of most of the previous generations, and even the more recent, quote, West Indians by modern accounts, as they were dug up in mounds years ago. Even the modern West Indians, such as the Timucuans of Florida, were around 7+ feet. Timucua, Hawa, by the way. However, least I go on in a different tangent. We are here to discuss the age of those Indians, as in how old they generally got up to. Now take everything I am about to say and about to read with a grain of salt. In terms of the Timucuans in this, I guess, Amazonian history, there's this little excerpt from a chief. For one of their chiefs assured me that he was 300 years old, and that his father, whom he showed me, was 50 years older than he. And I can truly say that when I saw him, I thought I was looking at no more than human bones covered with skin. They certainly put Christians to shame, who produced their span of life by holding moderate feasts and drinking parties. Oh, and take note, remember, a bunch of these supposed Europeans coincidentally have all this white curly hair, woolly hair, and white beards. And also being described with that swarthy skin. Interesting. Wonder who got that trait. Oh, and remember, the conquistadors are swarthy Judeans. Columbus is a swarthy Judean, and the, quote, Hebrew interpreter to translate what the West Indians were speaking. Oh, and remember, the continent was connected a short time ago. Small tangent. We'll be reading Secret Cities of Old South America by Harold T. Wilkins. Page 64. Yet no scientific folklorist can or should disregard extremely ancient traditions on the Atlantis cataclysm, which exists to the same tenor but in Galloway, Ayr, and at the other end of a long line in the West Indian islands of the Caribbean. These myths, naive as they must be, yet crystallize a magic vision of unknown facts, as one believes them to be, of astonishing character. Strange facts relating to a lost land, lost world, of which not even some forgotten Greek commenter on the dialogues of Plato Sultan can have dreamt. Remember, Plato isn't real. I went through this, I think, like the first video on the channel. In the backcountry of the British West Indies, island of Trinidad, natives of Aboriginal stock assert that the Trinidad is a very ancient country, and many thousands of years ago formed parts of the largest country in the world. This was at a time when there was no sea at all. This great antediluvian country, or continent, the natives call it Erie, Ireland, pronounced almost exactly as Erie of Ireland, as I said, and Old Trinidad, says the natives, prior to a great cataclysm that sank the lost continent, was also known as Erie. Gold goes on the tradition in Trinidad, used to be brought by donkeys over land from the south, that is, ancient South America, in a day when no Caribbean Sea separated Trinidad from this proto-South America. Something happened, say the back block Trinidadians, which broke up the land into little bits, and the sea came in from the north and the south and the Wales. But new people kept coming, and many babies came. In those very ancient days, says the Trinidadian myths, people did not walk up or down stairs, or tramp up hills and down. They hit a plate and made a song, which song said where they wanted to go, and they went. Sounds like a Vimina. And anybody could dance in the air like leaves blown by the winds. A Vimina. It was a very happy time, and there were no slaves. All the live people sang and danced and feasted all the time. The natives added that the only people who worked were passed on, who didn't feel tired no more and don't feel hungry. There wasn't much work because everything was so light. As to what this cryptic phrase about light may mean, the native seemed unable to explain, but his reference to deceased men is a singular allusion to what are known in Haiti and on the plantations in Dutch Guyana as the zombies, alleged to be shells of resurrected deceased people acting as slaves, a practice which a queer law in the Haitian code makes illegal and punishable. Trinidad folklore says that in this golden age of Erie, Ireland, cooked things were not eaten, but plenty of fruit, milk, raw fish, and raw meat. They drank plenty of strong drink fermented by the sun from some fruit or palm juice or sap. Ask how big was this antediluvian land of Erie? The native says, I don't know, but it was all the world, and it went on and on towards the east, where the sun rose. And the peoples were very rich, and there were buildings like pointed squares. Shown a picture of a pyramid, and the natives say, yes, they were like that. How did the people get to the top of these buildings? The native, they made the songs to the plate, but they didn't want to go there much because there were secrets up there. There were no fighters in those days. Nobody ever fought unless they had too much to drink. They did not hunt, but sometimes they caught fish in the rivers, or snared birds, or iguana, dragons, or manikou, manatee. There wasn't anything to hunt in those days. A native cook named Adela of Grenada, West Indies, danced a dance which is identical with an Irish jig performed by old women in Galway. She said it was a fete dance performed all over the great country of Erie when the harvest was gathered, which maybe was corn or maybe maize, the original. Down in the south, she added. She meant ancient South America and the other natives of other West Indian islands have also this tradition. There was a golden serpent that everyone was afraid of, but I don't know much about that, except that it wore a spiked crown and danced when it was angry. Was also a god there who threw golden knives when it thundered. Mother told me that the people of Trinidad, who are nearly all deceased now, had come from the east, that they ran away when the land broke up. That was when all went under the sea. In Grenada, West Indies, the upcountry natives spake of the least bronze and say that when people passed, you had to have a wake for 2 days and make a great noise all the time in case you heard the bondies wailing. If you heard them, you passed in a year. Here and derived from no old Irish settler, one has a piece of folklore suggestive of some long vanished landlink, which is identical with the wakes of modern Erie, Ireland. The leprechaun, or wrinkled old man goblin of Celtic folklore. It would seem with the banshee, an old man up country in Trinidad spoke of some things he had seen done by the Largos, which he said were evil spirits in some places where folk had done very bad deeds. This must be an undoubted reference to the Lope Garo, or werewolf, or lycanthrope of old Teutonic or Anglo-Saxon folklore. It is a remnant of the unpleasant black practices of West and Central Africa natives. Native black witch doctors. Again, most people are not from Africa, they just keep bringing up Africa. As the making of hubabs at wakes is of the Tibetan practice of banging drums and blowing horns to frighten ghosts from houses or villages in the dark hours. An old black native from upcountry in Grenada, West Indies, also had something to say about the ancient Gold Road overland from South America to the land of Erie. He reiterated a legend about the expulsion of snakes from the Proto-Antilles, which is strangely reminiscent of St. Patrick and the snakes of old Ireland. Said the old man, there are few snakes in West Indies, because a great king once cursed them all, as one had bitten him, and them snakes all went to south, down the gold road to the old places. I asked what he meant by the old places. He replied, "Don't know, but thousands of years ago, you could walk down the gold road from here to South America. Many clever people lived in South America in those ancient days." He also alleged that in those ancient days, folk whose relatives neglect their obscurities, he used this word, did the heavy work in the field because they didn't want no food, and they kept on working all the time. And they didn't want no money, of course. But surely the old man did not really believe that deceased men were made to work. "I, old man," said he, "I see a lot of almighty queer things happen. What you spoke might be in them old times. Why? Anything, I believe, 'cause everybody he tell the same things, all for years in those islands. Since I little boy, I hear some stories all the time, all over, and what I say is what everyone say must somehow be true. These deceased men work all the time for a long time, till more come. Everybody say they call them all zombies. Boss, he pays small money every time for overseer. That is, they never get tired and don't want no feeding. And good mans like me don't have to do no hard work in them days. There don't seem to be no zombie hereabouts." The old man then spoke of Gold Road, down which he thought the zombies went to work in mine when they were no more needed. However, leaving that aside, he said that this Gold Road belonged to a very far off day, when gold came up from South and Trinidad and all the other places in the West Indies was one very big country. His old grandfather, however, had said that Grenada did not belong to the big country, but was post-cataclysm in origin, or to give. The old blacky words, he said, as some other people tell me, that when everything break up, same like volcano, only plenty volcanoes all to once, then big country be covered all with water, and Grenada come up from the sea to help people get saved from the waters. Same like the Caribs, that's how they come. Further questioned, the old blackie said, "Jeez, these old writers, bro. I do know if a new race came up from the sea, or if it was the old ones who escaped being drowned in the waters. But I think them Caribs was the people from the big country. No one knows exactly how it all happened, but it was a very long time ago. There's plenty tales in Trinidad about the land to the east where the sun rose. There was probably airy Atlantis," the old man said. "They were true, too. Plenty land, plenty people, and they all teachers and very wise men, as plenty people often tell me." He also added one of these stories of Immaculate Conception, which, of course, far antedate any brand of Christianity, whether Byzantine, Greek, or Roman Catholicism. In fact, later in this book, they will be seen related in ancient Mexican traditions to that wise man in black, the culture hero, Quetzalcoatl, who was either an Atlantean from the motherland or from her imperial colony in High Brazil of South America, said the old Trinidad native. "Very good man saved my forebears. He was very wise, whose name was Par. His mother was never but no man for his wife. She was the only virgin over the age when men go with women that I have ever heard of in the West Indies, and her son was born without a man, same like Jesus Christ. It could be, the Holy Father says, have faith, not ask stupid questions. I am good man, and have plenty faith. The Holy Father, very pleased with me. My forebears came from the great land, where it rains a lot, and people always feast and have wakes all the time. Now let us turn to the other end of the line of the ancient tradition. In the land of fire, then the land of Erie, or Ireland, in Galloway, there is also very ancient traditions identical with that of the West Indian back block natives upcountry. It is, however, rather confused, but it is that long ago Galway on the one side and Trinidad on the other formed, part of the very large continent that was far from the sea. I shall have more to say on Galway. An old woman who lived in Caribbean settlements in St. Vincent Island, West Indies, told an English lady of my acquaintance this same ancient tradition of a big country that disappeared in the sea after a colossal earthquake. It was a story she clearly had heard when she was a young child. The water came in, she said, and made the islands. But some of the islands, she had been told, had actually formed part of this ancient big country, to wit modern Trinidad, West Indies, and Barbados. This old woman insisted that wigs had not been introduced into the West Indies by modern Irish settlers. No, she said, wigs were ordered by the Great Serpent thousands of years ago. Serpent. Edo? They were for the purpose of frightening off bad spirits who lived in the craters of deceased volcanoes. The Caribs, she said, were the real owners of the big country, Eire, Ireland, and had a king whose gold crown was in 3 parts. This reminds one of the triple terra of the ancient Pontific Maximus of the pagan Rome, and his modern descendant, the Holy Father of Vatican, Rome of the Catholic Christianity. He wore this triple gold crown, said the Carib woman. He had 3 sons and 3 daughters, and each son married a daughter. As we know, first decreed marriages of this type were common in Egypt of the pharaohs, the Peru of the Incas, and some say in old Atlantis or some of her continental islands. At a certain epoch, one of the king's sons went to the south, one to the southwest, and the third to the north. Caribs of the far day did not, she said, have to walk unless they wanted to. Their wise people could fly quite easily. What they did was to clap on gold plates, make music, and then they fly. Vaminas. The old Caribbean woman then gave a version of the Golden Age and of the Great Deluge cataclysm myth. Everyone feasted and danced and sang. No one was ever poor or hungry, so they all got proud and everybody wanted to be king. And some very bad ones stole some sacred fire and destroyed plenty people. And because they did not do right, this story of stealing sacred fire I shall refer to later. She was empathetic that the big country was not burnt up. People say it was the same like big poison. Everything broke. All the land broke. Seemed like broken Erie. And the water came beneath all the pieces that was left and made islands. And there was plenty red plasma, vital fluid, shed. Oof, gory. She could not explain why or when was this red plasma shed. The king was very angry. He said the sea should cover them all up and no one would know they had ever been alive. She then gives a variant of the Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, Bochecha legends of the culture heroes of the ancient Central and South America. And very good men came from the east and made all the little islands and saved a lot of good Caribs. But for hundreds and thousands of years there was terrible times. Volcanoes everywhere threw out fire and it kept on raining and flooding everything, and soon the heavens burst one day and the earth burst all up and the big country disappeared. Seemed like the king said, then there wasn't no king again. And all the people who escaped on the good Saints Island had to look after themselves until they were all wiped out by the new people who came from the east, except some of her ancestors. Then she added some curious details which are corroborated in other traditions in classic Greek or Latin writers about the state of the Atlantic after Atlantis completely vanished. No one after the terrible times could ever go to the east and to the land of the rising sun because they had no big boats. only little ones, and they couldn't fly no more, and they had to work hard to live. It is curious that a late 13th century monk nicknamed Solitaris or the Recluse, he was a legend. He was a learned scholar, also mentioned the state of the oceans after the sinking of Atlantis. This monk, Honorus Augustinus Sia, fake names, lived at Aton about AD 1300 and written about the Atlantis of Plato, so it was not real. He says that where it once stood, the sea is clotted and curdled. One might also suppose that this guy had some reason to believe that Atlantis was famed for a breed of sheep, very white and fleecy, yielding the best wool for dyeing purple. Who had white woolly hair and white beards and wore purple because they were royal? Anyways, which in Greek myths he says was called the golden apples of Hesperides. One of the Atlantean islands, Melon in Greek, means either apples or sheep. Interesting. Jacob. The last surviving post-cataclysm continental island of Atlantis was called by certain Greek writers Poseidon or Poseidonus. It was said by one of Marcellus, a geographer who may have lived sometime after the 1st century of our own era and who wrote Ethiopian history. By the way, Ethiopian just means dark skin. Again, to have been the last of the Atlantean islands left after the great island was submerged. He cryptically says traditions about the Atlantis had been collected by travelers in an inaccessible island of the ocean. The inhabitants of the Atlantic island of Poseidon, not less than 1,000 stadia, said nearly 115 English miles, author, preserved a tradition handed down to them from their ancestors of the existence of the Atlantic island of prodigious magnitude, which had really existed in those seas which, during a long period of time, governed all the islands in the Atlantic Ocean. From this not too clear passage, it seems that Poseidon must not be confused with a greater continent of Atlantis. Now let us glance back at the story of the long-lost mysterious continent called Erie, which is current among the older folk in Galway. It is extraordinary interest to those who have reason to suppose that the empire of Atlantis extended far to the north. Indeed, I may say here mention in passing that in a river creek called Huff on the eastern coast of Ireland is a cliff on which carved number of very ancient symbols or letters to which are identical with letters found in the deceased city of Atlantina, Brazil by the old Banderisters about AD 1750. The old folk of Galway in West Erie say that the king of Galway in the very old, far-off days was the greatest king in the world. He had 3 crowns, and one crown meant he owned Africa whence the gold came and the beautiful jewels. He sent one of his sons to Africa to make a great kingdom there that lasted a million years. Jeez. And another son lived right away out in the west in the land of the setting sun, where all good men go when they pass on. There were no ships then, only boats, because there was not any sea at that time, but only rivers and lakes, and all this great land was called Erie, Ireland, pronounced Erie or Aryan, which is just Jacob. In those far-off days, everybody was fairy or an evil spirit. Benedum. They danced in the air like leaves blown by wind, and when the right sort of music was played, it was beautiful, sad music, because it was full of wishes, and when people wished they sighed, and Edom was jealous because everyone was so happy and good and light-hearted. So she sent for a lot of poisonous snakes. But the good St. Patrick came and banished all the snakes forever, and sent the devil herself away to the west, where she lived to this day. To be sure she does. The reader may compare these Irish folk stories with those told above by the natives of Grenada and Trinidad, they seem valid existence of some long past land link between Galway and the West Indies. The Galway folk gives us some remarkable glimpses of this vanished land of Erie Atlantis. There was, say the old folk of Galway, a broad highway, a very beautiful, with lights all the way that led to the islands of the west, or the blessed, and those islands were many months' journey along the great road. At intervals on the highway were roads that led to other parts of the great kingdom of Erie, the Aryans, Jacob, or Ireland. One road led to wonderful land where people were all black. Further north, the people were all tall and handsome and drove about in gold chariots. The Aryans, Jacob, they had great buildings too. Sounds familiar. The likes of which were never seen in Ireland. Sounds like the Priest King's buildings, the Crystal buildings. And those buildings had no stairways because in those far off days, everyone could fly from Venus. There was a terrible Edomite who lived in the west, beyond the islands of the Bliss. She lived, the free martin, lived on newborn baby, and he had a serpent who ate live goats. So cannibalism was going on over there, pretty much. The goats being Edom as well, and the serpents being Edom as well. He was indeed terrible, and tried every way he could think of to make men bad. But this is like those old, goofy stories. It's so sad because it's like, it's reality. But one way to keep him off and render his spells of no avail was to laugh and dance and sing. And then when everyone was happy and all the lights shining, he had to hide his face. And if everyone was ugly or deformed in the great country, it was because the Edomites had struck them. Basically, they were born from a swear, so they got struck and then made into an Edomite because of free martin, because they come from, when a biological goes with a swear. I talked about this already. And in old days, such ugly and deformed people were destroyed. You remember, because they didn't like Edomites, they hated them. Good versus evil, Jacob versus Edom. More will be said later of this eugenic practice of the Atlanteans, who certainly would not have allowed mental defects and degenerates to live and propagate their species, Edom, as we in our age do. The Galway folklore had something more to say about St. Patrick, who, as one may suspect, has been merged with a Roman Catholic or Irish Christian Celtic Hagalorical variant of the wise man in black, Quetzalcoatl, the Atlantean missionary and culture hero of ancient Mexico. He told the Irish folk, says the myth of the wise men who lived in the far, far east, where the sun rose, and said that the knowledge under the rule of the golden serpent was mostly to be found in the west. Golden serpent. Interesting. While wisdom, an entirely different thing, was to be found under the rule of the golden dragon in the east. This looks like a curious reference to very ancient China. One day, says Galway myth, the dragon will eat the serpent, and everyone will be wise and good. Where have we heard this before? And there will be no more babies born. This rather cynical turn to the myth might suggest that the attainment of wisdom might induce a desire to exterminate the race of Freemartins, or for some form of racial. The myth of Galway folk goes on to say that it was the devil, Edom, the Edomites, the Freemartins, who caused men to fight, for neither under the rule of the dragon, the priest kings, the Khan, King David and Solomon's, Prester John, some form of the extremely ancient civilization in antediluvian China, Asia, nor under the rule of the golden serpent. By the way, this is China, if you haven't been picking up on this. Nor under the rule of the golden serpent Atlantis was there any fighting, a great being, any form of war, but the people of the serpent became too clever and would not think of eternity at all. Swears being married, basically. Became too smart in that sense. Tactic to like destroy the empire by basically only making free martin demons. They lived only for the present to have a good time. Yep, that is very much these free martin dukes for sure, especially Magog and Gog. So Hawa in his anger sent a great teacher to them, but they laughed at the teacher and called him a bastard and a man of a low birth. Then they drove him away, and another race of men murked him. Jeez. So there came a terrible earthquake, and it split the great country, and the waters rushed in, and the great country disappeared to the bottom of the ocean. But it broke off at Galway because St. Patrick had baroqued it. So Galway ever after had a sea coast. This St. Patrick is clearly not the historical missionary who passed about AD 463 and who is the subject of Colan's Latin folios. Maybe some light, dim and flickering and doubtful, as it is thrown on this Galway story of the long lost continent which became the paradise of the Gael. Another curious vanished land link between Ireland and the West Indies is the institution of the Beltane or Ball Feast of the 1st May near Gilosar in the Severn Valley. There is a hill called Mayhill on whose top is a grove of trees. Local tradition says that never more than 100 trees will grow in this grove on the hilltop, which is anciently associated with the Beltane of the sun god. In another part of the same country, in Stroud Valley, the custom of the Beltane associated with a vanished sun temple of the Silurian origin has given rise to the name of the very hamlet called Custom Scrubs.
And of a hamlet, some 7 or more miles away over the Cotswold Hills, in the direction of the River Severn, which is called Meady Scrubs. In the element, customs refers to a very ancient festival, the Beltane. It is remarkable that this same sun-worshipping custom of a very ancient, worldwide Heliolithic race is called, to this day, the Belton by the blacks and Caribs in the West Indies.
Grenada has a singular tradition that the last king of the big country of Erie lies buried in an ancient tomb somewhere in the island of Barbados. But in Barbados itself, the tradition is that this ancient king was the last emperor of Constantinople. Where have we read this before? Something similar, huh? Maybe you watch this. This imparts a singular Byzantine twist to an ancient tradition. A word may be interjected at this place concerning the alleged power of defying gravity, or as it's called, levitation. This power is by ancient tradition attributed to the rulers of Mu or Lemuria or place. We went over this as well in the same series or the video. South America is Mu. I don't know where they get this from. And 2, this levitation stuff is the Minas, the thing that the Nagals were known for using throughout the Indias. It's just like... Anyways, in relation to the ships that could rise above the waters in violent storms, I mean, just as back to that, it was known that the Indians, they had cities that were flying and they hid amongst the clouds, which would be like Jacob had cities that basically hid amongst the clouds. So it's just like, reading this stuff is just Duke babble. It is also said to have been possessed by higher caste in old Atlantis, in the Andean highlands of Colombia, along the Rio Magdalena, in a very singular deceased civilization of San Agustin cities, or temple mausoleum of a race unknown who left colossal statues, some of them portrait statues like those in Easter Island. This singular race, and it goes on, pyramid will, so it said, reach the Mayans pyramid at Chichen Itza. Itza denoted the name of the old Atlantean prince Azos. Their mathematical and geophysical calculations were made with great accuracy in relation to the geophysical centering. Yada yada yada. I'll stop there for now. So yeah, the continents were connected before, if you're not picking up on what they're saying. So this conquistador stuff, it's not real. Also, Ah, hello, this is Europe? Europa? China? Remember, just a short while ago, the Americas was vast and directly connected to Russia and modern China, until magically, once again in recent memory, it was mysteriously broken up and everybody, quote, had to go to the Caribbean islands. The Caribbean islands of Egypt, by the way. Let's not forget that little part. The part where all the supposed slaves from, well, I can't say Africa because we aren't exactly from there, as most slaves are from the Pacific Islands, such as the Philippines, Sardinia, Ireland, North and Central America. Nonetheless, what I mean to say is born in Egypt again, within the Fertile Crescent, or correctly born from, as it's now outside the Fertile Crescent, that is the Caribbean. The crest is a representation of a free martin, born from the squires of Edom and bound by many relationships of Egypt. I mean, hey, if you want to believe a bunch of old jacks in heavy enchanted armor or something, bolted through the Amazonian forests, I mean, come on, how would the supposed Ethiopian biologicals not know where their main cities are in America, when the continents are connected in recent memory, as in Ireland and Greenland connected to Canada, Canaan, and the land bridge between South America up from the Caribbean islands to Ireland? My brother, you can walk across.
According to these old natives of the Caribbean,
many supposed native jacks of Alaska and Canada remarked on being able to cross back and forth between Russia, Tartaria, Tar, Darkskin, and Canaan, Canada. The continents were connected. It's like this story about Indians and Europeans. It's just this fictitious Amazonian garbage. Another excuse to like hide Jacob. Back to the Timucua tribe, the Timucua tribe, the hermaphrodites of Florida, let's just say, of the Timucuan people. In this text, it describes hermaphrodites, Edomites, dukes and duchesses, who are shunned by the natives but used to carry supplies and victims of warfare, wounded, sick, or deceased, either on their backs or on litters made of reed mats. The litters are carried with poles and leather straps, which are placed around the head. Jacob didn't consider dukes and duchesses, homunculus, to be people, or biologicals basically. They were lower than hated. The demons that do all the chiefs and the natives or the king's work. Solomon's temple being built by his demons. Homunculus. So yeah, the dukes and duchesses were queer, inverted, dispensable third-class citizens. The biological jacks, they did not consider them people at all. We'll fractal back to this in a different sense. Now that we know that they, the biologicals, and our homunculus, gender-inverted dukes, lived upwards of 300 plus years and going, what does that tell you about the biological timeline of an average man or Bozo the Clown? As you can see, the way they have written this highly compressed Old and quote New Testament makes it seem like their ages dropped off from around the generation of Father Abraham. Brahma was around 175 years in compressed biblical context, but our history says differently, doesn't it? Remember, when you see a man of Jacob in any given context, not only is he a biological broad man, but this man may be referring to either a clan, a family name, or a city name, a town name, or quite literally a biological man. This generally applies to other biological mans, besides of course dukedom, and many of the nations that were afterwards infected by these dukedoms. By the squires, of course. That's the real means of attack, from Edom by the way. Then they, the two snakes, then get eaten by the single dragon and turn into one nation, a kingdom. Jacob and Edom, Saxons. You see that? See how subtle they are with it? Hide the E from the doom and change the Jacob to king. Demons. Jinn, I'm telling you, bruh. Confederate to the end. Besides that, look, if this story about the Indians is just somewhat allegorical, now more in the sense of it being completely fake as we still have their giant stature or height, which doesn't add up, it would mean the average age of a biological was anywhere near from 200 to 800 plus years old as a conservative estimate, especially after many of the bones and crazy stuff you can dig up around this age range. It's completely reasonable, honestly. Meaning that one old Indian would be anywhere near 800 plus years. Think about that for a second. That was just some hundreds of years ago. Supposedly, of course, but still. Which would also mean that the ages in the Bible are so laughably off. For example, a Jake that lived for 105 years could be translated to be every year of that man, clan, corporation, or city before being merged would be every 1 year of that 105 years is 10 modern years by estimation. Bro, that's insane to think about in modern context. We clearly have two different bodies, and the excuse of, oh, the vapor canopy has sunken down so we are small and live shorter lives. No, this is proper genetic engineering by both Jacob and the angels, and literally the earth, or Egypt as before. Side note, can you imagine the size of the fruits, like pomegranates, the grapes of Canada back then, or America, let's just say? Let's just say, hey, we'll stick to the narrative that they lived up to 300 plus years and going. Bro, that's completely throws out much of the compressed biblical timeline narrative. Now it should also be hitting where they don't want to bring up America in history as being the real old world. Far too many things that many of these old jacks and dukes are saying just completely destroy Edom's Confederate scripts. One last thing before I go fully into what is the New Testament. Ever wonder what the other giants before the giants of Jacob were doing in Canaan? The quote Raphaim and Anakim. But these guys were probably insanely tall for giants to be called giants. Knowing how tall Jacob's white woolly haired children are, you could say these giants were titans. Or maybe you could say Thor fighting the giants. Besides that, what were they doing exactly? What did they do day to day? Matter of fact, before that, what does their name mean, Raphaim?
Rephite, or Rephaim, refers to a people of greater than average height and stature in Deuteronomy 2. The first root suggests healing of some sort, as in the purgation souls. At least the souls of those who in life were incompletely righteous. Undergo in Gehinnom, between annihilation and the world to come to atone for their earthly sins. The second root denotes weakness or powerlessness. Souls in Sheol are weak in the sense that they hold no physical power or status as they did in the living world. Because all things that give the living power are moot in Sheol, its inhabitants are thus powerless and weak, and must be submissive to Hawa. Rephite or Rephaim have also been considered the residents of the netherworld Sheol. Possible examples of this usage appear as shades, spirits, or deceased in various translations of the Bible. Rephaim may be read as deceased ancestors or weakeners, as opposed to Rephaim, doctors. Deceased ancestors? What's going on here? Rephaim as the deceased or deceased kings undertakes a detailed study of several enigmatic funerary ritual tests from the ancient coastal city of Ugarit. Cult of the deceased? The long deceased? Malakuma. Recently deceased kings were invoked in a funeral liturgy, presented with food or drink offerings, and asked to provide blessings for the reign of the current king. This suggests that many ancient Israelites imagined the spirits of the deceased as playing an active and important role in securing blessings, healing, or other benefits in the lives of the living.
In terms of necromancy, do you recall this? When Saul went to the woman with the quote familiar to talk to Samuel Elohim, keep in mind he went after a woman, as in a biological woman, as the potion bottle. In addition to that, the word used is Yedonai, probably a knowing one, specifically a conjurer, by impl a ghost. Need to seek after wizards to be defiled by a woman in the context of Saul, Leviticus 26, to prostitute himself by abusing his seed to make a demon, Edomite, with a woman, to make a homunculus to cheat the system by having this other form of plasma Freemartin wizard tell you about the world. Now remember what I said about the flesh plasma the red blood, heart, and on. What happens when that body of yours passes on? The biological man of Jacob is instantly judged by the heavens above and sent right back down. Both in West Indian and Buddhist traditions, reincarnation is near instant. From our Jack normal perspective, what would you then say about the old body? All that flesh and red dumb spirits and mercury spirits, seed? Or should we actually say what happens to her? Seeing as there is technically no man actually there, right? The soul is left, the Solomon is not there. What's left behind is technically majority just female flesh, spirit, a plasma wizard. So when they say Raphael, wizard, homunculus, familiar spirit, or old spirit, I want you to realize it's just Eve and her mushroom clowns trolling you. And this is the problem with giving a biological man, or man Adam rather, a clay body. It's necromancy, it's sin. And now you have this female snake trying to match you and be you. When you pass on, she then takes on your role even without you. Again, a snake with many scales. It is still one snake and one phenomena. That is the female heart, Earth. It's worse when you're actually going out of your way, like Clan Saul, to perform necromancy with a woman to summon these spirits. Male impersonators, man impersonators, from wherever they came from. It's funny because they basically know everything about you and appear Elohim-like. This is noted also with the shroom trips and LSD that people have with these female Duke plasma entities. Some may even appear like biological men, yet they are not. I said all of that to say the things these Titan female spirits and Canaanites were doing were so abominable. Such necromancy in so many forms. I've heard things such as putting these Duke spirits in animals, machines, synths, and other people. It was bad. But you know, now finally on to the New Testament.
Jeremiah 22, verse 6. For thus saith the Lord unto the king's house of Judah, verse 8. And I will prepare destroyers against thee, every one with his weapons. And many nations shall pass by this city, and they shall say every man to his neighbor, Wherefore hath the Lord done thus unto this great city? Verse 17. But thine eyes and thine heart are not but for thy covetousness, and for to shed innocent blood, and for oppression, and for violence, to do it. Verse 18. Therefore thus saith the Lord concerning Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah king of Judah. Verse 19. He shall be buried with the burial of an ass, drawn and cast forth beyond the gates of Jerusalem. Verse 24. As I live, saith the Lord, though Coniah the son of Jehoiakim king of Judah were the signet upon my right hand, yet would I pluck thee thence. The Elohims really didn't like this Jake. Verse 26. And I will cast thee out, and thy mother that bare thee, into another country, where ye were not born. Verse 27. But to the land whereunto they desire to return, thither shall they not return. Verse 28. Is this man Coniah a despised broken idol? Is he a vessel wherein is no pleasure? Wherefore are they cast out, he and his seed, and are cast into a land which they know not. Verse 29. O earth, 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 hear the word of the Lord. Verse 30. Thus saith the Lord, write ye this man childless, a man that shall not prosper in his days, for no man of his seed shall prosper, sitting upon the throne of David, and ruling any more in Judah.
Okay. Let's now go to Matthew 1.
Matthew, chapter 1, verse 1. The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. They list all the clans till we get to verse 11. And Josias begat Jeconiah and his brethren, about the time they were carried away to Babylon. It then lists clan Jeconiah's sons, all the way to verse 15 and 16. And Eliud begat Eleazar, and Eleazar begat Mathan. And Mathan begat Jacob, and Jacob begat Joseph the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ.
Isn't Jeconiah cut off from us? Or rather, the previous generation of Jacob? Oh, yes he was, to the point of being listed as childless by the Elohims directly. So, buddy, how is Jesus being listed here in the Bible when the clan was cut off by the literal angels and the other jacks. I do hope you get from this chapter of Matthew onward is simply made up and a duplicate, an allegory of the Old Testament, highly compressed in comparison to its larger counterpart. The real question, of course, is why? Why make a quote New Testament while clan Jesus, son of Joseph, king of Egypt, kingdom? Sorry, almost went too far there. While Jesus is still following the Old Testament, why not just continue the supposed Old Testament? Nonetheless, Jesus is Joseph's direct son in the context of the story. Once again, remember what I mentioned about the angels and the biological man. One and the same in many contexts. They banged before publicly marrying, basically. Here's an example. According to later Judean historiography, notably the 10th century work Sefer HaKazar by Judah Halevi, an angel, or at least heavenly emissary, descended to Caesarea bearing the Torah. The angel's presence was meant to demonstrate the truth of, Judaism and persuade the king, while the actual book to back that was supposed to be something along the lines of Maccabees, which was taken out of the canonical Bible for reasons, of course. The Maccabees, particularly the Hasmonean leaders following the Maccabean revolt, are described in historical texts first convergence of conquered peoples, notably the Idumeans and the Ithurians, the people that were like oats on the outskirts, as an alternative to destruction. Hence, that male angel giving the Hazarian king the Torah would more than likely be the biological mans of Jacob, either by forced conversion because they didn't like these wild man name stealers, or conversion by conviction, or rather fear. Went on a tangent there actually. Anyways, why is it Jesus is mentioned in Maccabees, by the way, in the context of being from the Old Testament with the patriarchs? Jesus, for fulfilling the word, was made judge in Israel. The Greek word used in the New Testament for both the Old Testament figure Joshua and Jesus Christ, Iosus, which is a transliteration of the Hebrew name Yeshua or Yehoshua, meaning the Lord is salvation. This same Greek form, Iosus, was used in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, to render the name of Joshua, the son of Nun, which was also our fathers that came after, brought in with Jesus, Joshua, into the possessions of the Gentiles, whom Hawa drove out before the face of our fathers unto the days of David. Jehoshua, Quetzalcoatl, son of Joseph Hawa, from Egypt, they went and came from back to Canaan. Totally not an allegory. But let's continue. Hawa, Quetzalcoatl, is being described in Psalms chapter 2 as the literal son of the Elohims. Even silly little semicolon commenter over here agrees. Broken clock, I guess. Oh, and before I forget,
of this name Muhammad, because Muhammad, listen, the name is important. My name is Jay, but I'm not the only Jay. There are many Jays. Your name is Mel. You're not the only Mel. There are hundreds, thousands of Mels all over the world, and you're all living here in the 21st century. But in order to stipulate that I am the Jay that lives here in Pennsylvania and you are the Mel that lives there in Europe, this is only 1400 years ago. So Muslims, you've got to prove to us, give us evidence that there is a man named Muhammad, a man, not a title, not a reference, not a colophon that you put onto a category. It has to be a person, a man that lived between 570 and 632 and started receiving this book in 610 there in those two cities. And that's why we want to ask you again, Muslims, show us the evidence for this man. We're going to show you that there's all kinds of evidence for this name, not for this man, but for this name, which is not a name. It has nothing to do with the name. But we're going to go start with the 7th century. But, well,
Dr. Robert Kerr made a very interesting observation about the name Muhammad. If you look at the other variations of the name, Mahmed, Mahmoud, etc., and you'll see variations of that name all over the Middle East, you can't actually guess those names from Muhammad. It means that there was another similar sounding name which all of these names came from. So you have to actually go back. Now, if you go all the way back to Ugaritic, which is 14 centuries BC, you actually find in Ugaritic a word which is Makmed, which means the desirable one or the precious. So it could be used in the context of gold, because gold is precious. You would want it, you would desire it. And then the Jews who live close to Syria, the city of Ugarit is in Syria, right next to Israel. They pick up on that word, they like it, it's incorporated into Hebrew, and so you have the word Makmed. And we see two different versions of it in the Old Testament. We see Mohammedim, which is used in the Song of Songs. And it's referring to the lovely one. But what's interesting, it's used as a messianic title, and that's how the Jews see it. A similar word is Hamid, which is also found in the Old Testament. That term was even used further on, even into the Christian era, as a reference to Jesus. So the way Song of Songs is interpreted is that Jesus is talking to the church is responding back, and the church is referring to Jesus as the Maccadim, or the lovely, the precious one, etc., the praised one.
His mouth is sweetness itself. He is altogether lovely. This is my lover. This is my friend. O daughters of Jerusalem. Altogether lovely is Mahmud in Hebrew. There's the Mahmud. Ash day. And what's fascinating, in Hebrew, nobody suggests that this is a person named Mahmud. This is a title of the altogether lovely, referring to Solomon, but also a messianic title that is taken as a messianic title. There are 11 places in the Old Testament that use this word, Mahmud, over and over again. And in many cases, we could go through each one of them, but I think this is the most prominent, because isn't this interesting? Muslims have always claimed that this is a reference to Muhammad. They're Muhammad. They don't know that they're half correct. They are half correct. And this is a reference to the altogether lovely one, but it is not their Muhammad at all. It is the altogether lovely one, which we're going to find out is a messianic title that has to do not with their Muhammad, but someone completely different. Muhammadin is the one for 516.
Yes. So it's a poetic plural that is used, that just essentially, as you've described it, it means the altogether lovely. So that's essentially that word. It's a messianic title, as we said. The
Hamad or Hamid. And where is that found? Because that's another form of Mahmud. It's the diminutive form Hamad. Where do you find that in the Old Testament?
You can have a look. So one of the places that you find it is in Psalm 68:16, which God has desired for his abode. So it's the meaning of desired, or has desire. You have Proverbs 12:12, the wicked man desires the booty. And if you look at the variations on the word in Hebrew, you can see actually Makmed is one of them, something desirable. Now that's actually the form that became common in the 7th century to refer to the Messiah. The Arabic, you'll see similar words. So Hamid, praise; Makmed, desire, desirable thing; Mahmud, desirable, precious thing. So it's all related. So there's obviously a strong similarities between Hebrew and Arabic, which lends itself to these words being borrowed into Arabic.
Just to show you what the inverts have done, watch this. Psalms, Islamists. You will never unsee it. Jerusalem, the Duke Virgin, Sal, Amalek, supposed to be Jerusalem. Like I said, when you check the DNA E1B1B of a lot of these supposed Arabs, which are in fact just Ishmaelites, who in fact aren't even Ishmaelites, many of them are just Hazar Dukes. Nonetheless, they are inverted, which immediately makes them Edomites. As with almost all dukes in the area of Earth, Just remember, the Moors practiced Islam and Judaism, I guess you could say Christianity, but whatever, at that same time, and were at peace. How is that possible if not the same people doing the same thing? You know, same religion, one nation. We will fractal back to this topic later on. Jesus Joshua, son of Nun, seed, continued heir, son. Joshua, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the dragon priest, the dragon king, the Naga. These guys, bro. The sun god, son of the sun, he who controls the sun to attack his enemies. Ra in his purest form, normally a biological man of Jacob, takes on the mantle of sun god or sun king, or dragon king such as Sol for clan Solomon, and the woman take on the moon or bitter earth title, Mary as an example. It is not some strange heathen practice. It's quite obvious that we, children of the sun, Nagas, with our elongated front faces, would in some form symbolize, shocker, the Hoa and the sun, and Elohims. I mean, bro, you can't convert to Islam or Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Brahmanism because it's a biological man's DNA and a covenant made with specific Elohims and Hawa. Each nation of biologicals has a different set of man angels dealing with them. It's about jurisdiction rather than anything else. You can't convert to being of Father Jacob, my brothers and I. Yet Jehoshua was in Canada, retaking the land from the other giants, just as Odin, the Danite, and his Egyptian earthborn son or sons would take on the giants of Jotunheim. When I say the name Jesus, the word Zeus is probably running through your mind, with good reasoning, but we went over Zeus and all the other stuff in a different series. Well, last I recall. It's just Judah and Dan. Still the name Jesus, Zeus. Why can I get Esau from it? That's why I don't recommend saying these wordings in mind, and instead just say Jehoshua or Joshua. Now you should be as concerned when even the images of I, J, and Y are presented in old dates. More on that later. Why would the Freemartin Dukes and FDMs make another version of the same Bible in said Bible? What about this Jesus story has captivated them? I mean, Joshua, son of Jeconias, doesn't like Gentiles and calls them dogs. He bluntly states he's only there for his people. The disciples are supposedly only sending letters to other members of the church, as in other biologicals of Jacob. They say things like neither Jew nor Greek. If you have seen my previous series, you would know the Greeks and the Romans is just Jacob, the Greeks being predominantly Danites. So no, they are only talking to Jacob throughout the New Testament. So why do these dukes and duchesses like this book or books so much in comparison to the old? Watch this. Look closely at the image and tell me what you see. See it? Let me help you. Trans. You see, this is the problem with many of these dukedom Christians. How exactly was Joshua put down, let's say?
Acts chapter 5, verse 30. The Elohim of our fathers raised up Jesus, whom ye slew and hanged on a tree.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
So why are they depicting Jehoshua, Quetzalcoatl, the white-haired and bearded one, as being on a elongated tau or T-cross? Why are they depicting them as having leprosy? Why are they separating the Romans and the Greeks from being of swarthy Jacob? Why remove a book such as the Gospel of Thomas? I wonder, Mother, why don't we read a little from it?
Thomas also veers away from orthodoxy in how it views women at the close of the book, Jesus states. Look, I will guide her Mary to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit resembling you males. For every female who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Too on the nose for a gender-inverted Freemartin, wouldn't you agree? Why make a passage in the New Testament with saying it's a shame for a biological man to have long hair, but long hair is a female trait, even though colored people have always had dreadlocks and Viking Danite braids? I mean, Samson the Nazarite ever strike a bell to the writer? Oh, that's right. It's because a FDM, or rather a Duke, is writing this, and they have a culture of cutting their hair and going bald. What was it? Male pattern baldness or something like that? The thing that happens to women when they are introduced to testosterone. Same for a Duke. Well, let's go further. Why did the supposed Romans pierce the side of Joshua? What is the symbolic meaning of this? Well, we have been discussing the man Adam and how man made the Freemartin Eve from Adam, and they did pierce his side to make a Freemartin demon, mind you. Not a woman, but Eve, Lilith, the two Leviathans, the subtle snake. Furthermore, now you should start seeing what's really going on. Nehushtan, the brass rod of Moses. Same timeline as Joshua, by the way. They end up worshipping the same brass or copper serpent or dragon from Moses. In addition to this, we have Quetzalcoatl on the cross. Joshua was also known to have worn clothing with many towels on it, the squared ones, that is. And also, guys, have we forgotten Odin, the Danite? That clan offered themselves up on the world tree, supposedly, of course. And more importantly, Clan Absalom, the giant amongst giants, sons of David. He got his dreadlocks trapped and was hung up in a tree, to which the soldiers of David, the Romans, came and pierced his heart. Keep that in mind. Ironically, another son not meant to rule, just like Jeconiah's son isn't meant to rule. However, he had a huge following, wouldn't you say? But back to T for transgressions of Hawa's body. The man's body to make Freemartin demons, Edomites, by use of his cells, the piercing of the side of the biological man's, and his heart as in being Adam, to them viewing the biological man of Jacob as a female castratum, as in what the prophets mention about future Babylon, or our current Babylon, confusion, or leprosy, or rather paleness. In essence, forcing the biological man to be a woman in such a context, to rear kids, demons, Edomites, duchess and dukes, and even biologicals as a mother would. The elongated being both the male body and the dragon being pierced by the sword, spear, or rather the phallus, with the piercing being done by the woman around him, the soldiers. By the way, if you haven't picked up on it, in terms of the New Testament, Jesus, Joshua, and those two men who were crucified, forming the sundog effect, the three wise men, and John the Baptist, are the only biological men in the New Testament. We'll get into that in a bit.
She's cooking! Let her cook!